Tomorrow, Dragonflight will launch, but for many of us, it's going to be nearly 2 weeks before things properly start, and that is going to be Season 1's launch. So we have a look at the Affix rotation, which you guys haven't seen. They're actually changing to a 10-week rotation. They actually removed two affixes. They removed Necrotic and they removed Inspiring, and that is going to compress all the affixes down into a 10-week rotation. It used to be 12-week rotation. So this is a really hot topic on Tuesday. You might have seen it then. If you try to find it today, it's going to be pretty much impossible because Wowhead is literally spamming out these nonsense articles about why you should play a specific spec 3 days before launch. I don't know what they're thinking with that, but this is now 3 pages back at the time of recording this, and it's going to be 2 more days before it's uploaded. So I can only imagine how hard it would be to find it. But anyway. Yeah, the link will be down there. Let's take a look at this, and I'm going to give you guys my thoughts on all this because I have to say that this is really, I have a lot of thoughts. Let's put it that way. Okay. So let's just read what it says. This was collected on the Dragonflight beta over the last 8 weeks, which should leave enough data for the final 2 weeks. So this isn't actually Blizzard saying this. Okay. So I just want to say that there's a possibility that this is not what actually happens, which, isn't something to discount. I think it's a non-zero chance more than, I think there's a good chance, actually. I would say it's a higher than zero chance, one way or the other. Yeah. But there's supposed to be 10 affix rotations, so this is very likely what it will be. But maybe the order is different. And the reason I say that is because typically Blizzard and the community seem to have different definitions of when the season starts. Like, for example, whenever a preseason starts, like a patch comes out before the actual season launches, it's often that is when the actual rotation starts as well. So there's a reality here where the expansion launches and week 1 is actually the week 1 that comes out tomorrow. And we just don't have any affixes, so they don't exist. You know what I mean? Like, there's no Mythic Plus, and then the first week that we interact with is actually the third week. But let's talk about what we actually have here based on Wowhead's information, and if this ends up being true, we have some big issues here. Let's put it this way. So anyway, besides the affixes, you should also be aware that Mythic Plus has been made extremely much harder, okay, in two different ways. One is the scaling. They've basically made keys I think it's like more like 2.5 levels harder than they used to be. All right. And I don't know that for sure. That's just what people have told me. But I think at least 2 levels harder is the best way to look at it. Okay. So doing a 15 in the past would be like doing a 17. But there's also some perception here because coming off of season 3 and season 4, we have a much harder seasonal affix. All right. This seasonal affix isn't necessarily going to add difficulty to the dungeon like maybe those do, but it's not going to give you any power, basically, almost none. I mean, this is a very low impact. And I think in pugging, it's going to be almost a negative impact at times. We'll see how it plays out early, but I would expect this is definitely going to be the worst affix in terms of power that we've had. Now, to be fair, there used to be affixes that didn't give power. Okay. So if you played during BFA or Legion, especially, I mean, Legion didn't have any affixes at all. So yeah, this shouldn't be that surprising, right? But right now in season 4, like if you're doing a key like right now, you're doing an insanely easy version of any type of Mythic Plus ever because that affix is so powerful. It's really just overpowered, to be honest. Way too much power from one affix for almost no detriment. Like, it's very low cost. You even get count for them. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, it's a very easy affix compared to Thundering. But like I said, Thundering's not going to actually make the key harder. It's just not going to give you any power. So all of that being said, we have a much harder difficulty expectation, and the new expectation for gear is now to do 20s. And the first week of the season, according to Wowhead, is the hardest possible affix rotation. Like, without question, from the tank's perspective, there really couldn't be anything harder now that Necrotic has gone from the game. If you saw, I made videos on Fortified Raging and also Necrotic Sanguine. Those two affixes are frankly unfair, like actually just unfair together, from the tank role especially. But really, from the whole group's role, it's just most DPS probably don't give a shit. But yeah, the two combos is very, very, very unfair because a lot of mobs also have some kind of on death like rage. Okay, now in Shadowlands there was a lot of them. Honestly, I don't know if there's going to be a lot of them in Dragonflight, but any mob that is already difficult as it dies and also has raging and fortified, it's like broken. Like the scaling just stops working. Like the mob just becomes like 10 times harder all of a sudden. And as a tank, that's not very fun, and it's also very unfair because it really prioritizes classes that don't, there's not a lot of great options to deal with this affix. There's not really much you can do, you know what I mean? So it's hard to counter those two together. Now, obviously, raging alone is fine. Like that's part of the difficulty of the dungeon. But when you combine raging and fortified with mobs that already have mechanics that they do potentially at the end of their life, and like I said, that was common in Shadowlands, it becomes very difficult. So anyway, this is the first week of the season, potentially. I mean, again, if this is true, I don't know. Quacking is also there, but who gives a shit about that at that point? Yeah, this is going to be really, 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 really a hard way to start. To get a 20 done, if this is truly the first week, you probably are going to have to kite. I mean, to be honest, like how else, where are you going to get the gear? You know what I mean? Unless you're like a super, and now Mythic opens too the first week, technically, right? So if all of this lines up the way it would, yeah, you're going to be like 5 days of gearing before you can actually do any real keys because there's no way you're going to be doing 20s from what we've seen on the beta with the basic gear that you would have because you're already on the beta, you were scaled to like good gear. So this is interesting. This is very, 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 very difficult, I think. And again, I would say that these two affixes probably are just unfair. But then the next set is really confusing because then we have Tyrannical Grievous. Now in BFA, they made a whole post about Grievous. Big conversation about it because at the time it seemed like it was going to have to either be removed or massively rethought. And I think the way they described it at the time was like, we don't have a way to remove this and add something that's similar in its place. So what they did was they nerfed it. There's been a million nerfs to it now since. They nerfed the amount of damage it does. They nerfed the duration, all these things. But the biggest nerf was that whenever you do a direct spell, to a Grievous target, it removes one stack of Grievous, right? Because Grievous stacks up. It used to stack to 5. Now it only stacks to 4. All these things. And then on top of that, they're like, we'll just never have Grievous and Tyrannical again because, that's where really, like, Grievous on a Tyrannical boss is just, I mean, it's hard to believe that this is in the game. Like, I'm talking about Fortified Raging, and that's one thing, but now we have Tyrannical Grievous. So bosses that are already going to do a ton of damage, like when the boss is Tyrannical, it's hard to expect any healer to live through that, to be honest, like to get us through that. That's going to be really, really, really hard. So if those two first weeks are truly what the first weeks are, wow, man, Blizzard, if you did this on purpose, what is your goal here? I don't understand this. This is very, it's not, I don't know. I'm trying to be very objective about it, but it's hard. It's very hard to understand why they would do this. So if they didn't, like if this is not, I think there's a possibility that the first week is actually week 3. Because if you remember in BFA and in Dragonflight and Shadowlands, many seasons open with the easiest week. And most notably, I think season 3 and 4 open with the easiest week of Shadowlands. So this looks like the easiest week to me right here. You know what I mean? And I think they do that on purpose. I really do. And then because then it comes around again on week 12, you know what I mean? And then there's like this big kind of like climb through it. So I think that I don't know, man. I'm just trying to be optimistic here, but if that is actually these two are the first weeks, that sucks. Like hardcore sucks. Especially because Tyrannical should just not appear with Grievous, and Blizzard themselves have already said that. But somebody pointed out that it used to be Tyrannical busting Necrotic, I guess. And so now Grievous has just had to take its place. The thing is, Grievous, I just where else did it appear? Because it appears still only twice, so I don't really know what's happened here. I can't really, yeah, it's just very strange. The whole thing is very strange. But anyway, week 3 looks like the easiest week of the season right there. Tyrannical, I think it's just harder than Fortified nowadays in Pugs, at least in Shadowlands. We'll see in Dragonflight. But yeah, typically Fortified is easier. It's more on the tank. So this typically would probably be looked at as the easiest key. And it's actually ironic that we have Sanguine again because, of course, you might remember the Halls of Valor Sanguine strategies where people would just kite every single mob in that first area back in a straight line. Will that still happen? Unlikely, but yeah, they would just pull the entirety and then just kite it back in a straight line. So it's kind of funny we're coming back to that. But yeah, after that, it starts to get a lot more normal. We have Tyrannical Raging Storming, which I think is a much more fair raging target. And Storming, I think, it's going to depend. The difficulty is going to always depend on the dungeon design. Will there be any bad Storming dungeons? Right now, I'm not really sure, but I do think Ruby Life Pools could be one of them because there's a lot of already area denials. And I do think Thundering with Storming is probably actually going to be the low-key complicated fix set of the season because, yeah, there's going to be probably times when you're trying to get to each other at the last second, right? And you cannot do that because the Storming spawns or knocks you up in the air or something like that, And that could happen with Quacking too. Thundering can be very complicated with Quacking because if they both happen at the same time, they're going to overlap each other. So yeah, these are two very difficult fixes, but I think Storming will probably cause more trouble because people will probably accidentally get knocked up in the air as they're going to clear Thundering, and they will just either die to it or fail to it, and people will be upset about that. They will rage at that. But anyway, Fortified Spiteful Grievous sounds like it's gonna be a tough one to heal. I never find Spiteful, obviously, as a tank. It's never really something I'm thinking about, so I don't know. That one doesn't sound that bad to me, but as a tank, of course, Fortified and Grievous can be tough. But that's a lot more of a fair fix with Grievous, like I said. Tyrannical, Sanguine, and Explosive. That's probably going to be my favorite week. I definitely actually really like Explosive. It's my favorite affix for sure. And Sanguine, now that there's no more silly things like Necrotic, where you literally have to kite and basically like you have to do the two affixes at the same time, then yeah, I think it's a lot better. I like Sanguine probably a lot more now. Then we have Fortified Bolstering Storming, which Fortified Bolstering is another one that probably shouldn't exist anymore. But yeah, I mean, I think we're at a point now where it's probably getting pretty clear that the fix combinations are just not going to ever be balanced. And, I don't think they necessarily have to be for the system to work well. But I think people are getting like less and less interested in this. You know what I mean? At least that's the way I feel personally. And I'm usually very tolerant to this type of thing. So if I feel like this, I'd imagine most, these like higher up people are probably even more frustrated by it. Anyway, then we have Tyrannical Spiteful Quacking, which is probably another one of the easier weeks. It just depends on how difficult Tyrannical is, but in general, you have two affixes that have no real impact on the boss. Basically, like, Tyrannical is always going to be about, like, what other affix causes Tyrannical to be harder. And the worst possible one would be Grievous, as we said, but there's also things like Explosive. Tyrannical Explosive is a very hard week at times. And also, something like Storming or Quaking could actually cause issues on Tyrannical bosses. But that week, it's not really Spiteful's not really that big of a deal. Obviously, it has no impact on boss at all. So, Fortified Busting Explosive is week 9, quote unquote, week 9. And I think that's another really fun week. I love busting as well as Blood DK because I can AMS it, and Explosive is just fun. It's just fun to target these things. It's like a little mini game. You know what I mean? And then Tyrannical Bolstering Volcanic is probably, again, one of the easier weeks, but it is bolstering. So bolstering is going to be, it always slows the key down. And unfortunately, like, even though Fortified Bolstering is quite unfair, Tyrannical Bolstering is probably just as bad because when you have Tyrannical and Bolstering, you basically like encourage a lot of trash to be pulled all at once with Tyrannical, but then Bolstering slows that down. Now, Bolstering's been nerfed dramatically. Okay. And I would say it's been nerfed more than any other affix. Like that's probably the biggest nerf I've ever seen to any affix. And I don't really know how else they can do a nerf to Grievous or something like that to give it the same treatment. But you're gonna have some big issues here. And I'm gonna tell you right now, if this goes live this way, there's gonna be some addressing of this. This is gonna have to be addressed because it's literally something they've already addressed. So it's very strange that they would do this. And like I said, I would be skeptical that it happens exactly as Wowhead says. But, there's probably a very good chance that it does. And if so, then all of the signs point to this being a massive uphill climb, 2 weeks straight, trying to get a 20 done. Without gear, man, it's going to be wild. So I hope you'll stay tuned because we're going to be doing it hardcore, man. I'm going to be playing probably I did over 100 keys the first month of Shadowlands. I think it was even less than a month, even. So all going to be documented. There's going to be a spreadsheet. Every single run's going to be up there. So hope you guys will check that out. I'll tell you right now, man, I'm excited because this is a really big. I feel like this expansion is going to be the best one ever, honestly. So, Blood DK is such a great point. So, thank you for watching, guys. We'll see you guys hopefully tomorrow. Tomorrow is launch, and I will be streaming it using the Rested Experience Guide, and hopefully we'll get some profession stuff done afterwards, or whatever whatever world content seems relevant at the time. And then it's just going to start a cascade of me streaming a lot. So, hope to catch you guys there.